Back home from an amazing weekend at Fuel Fest LA. If you watched that video, you'll know we got into a pretty good wreck with this thing and the back end is all torn up, which means we've got some work to do to make this thing look good because I need to be driving at Drift Roulette in 5 days. Now, if you know anything about me, I rarely take the easy way out when it comes to stuff like this, which means we're gonna be chopping the whole back end off this car and doing a custom tube rear end. The hard part about that is I have no experience doing any of that. So let's figure it out. Before we get to the fun stuff, I want to jump back in time and show you guys some of the work I did before Fuel Fest, because it was a couple little odds and ends that really needed to be done, and it actually made this thing a whole lot better for that event. We're back in the garage, back from hot pit. The car is still in one piece. We do have some issues to fix. Number one being that transmission. As you guys saw in the last two videos, this thing was not shifting into third. It was popping out of third. It was a whole ordeal. Now the obvious answer is to get a new transmission, yank this thing out and replace it, which I will do, but I really don't have the time for that right now because I'm driving next weekend at Fuel Fest LA, and I don't have time to pull the trans on this thing, so we're just gonna drain the fluid. I'm gonna adjust the clutch pedal and try to get better engagement, and hopefully that'll hold us over for a little while longer. Trans fluid is changed, and thankfully it didn't look that bad. Well, I mean, it didn't look great, but there wasn't any like big chunks of metal or big shavings or anything to be super concerned about. I definitely still don't think the trans is in good shape, and I'm gonna swap it out, just not right now. The main thing I noticed when draining the fluid is that it was very watery. So I think the fluid had got overheated multiple times, and that causes oil to break down, and it's not the same viscosity as it was when it was new. So put a bit thicker weight. I put a little bit of synchro mesh. Basically, it's like an additive to kind of help the gears fall into place. So hopefully that'll hold us over for a few more events. I'm just going to adjust where the clutch pedal throws to try and get a bit more engagement out of it, because I think the clutch is also fairly worn because the engagement point is a lot lower than it used to be. So I'm going to adjust that, and that'll kind of be as much as I can do on the time frame that I'm on. So like I said, we've got an event this weekend. Okay, now on to a problem that this thing has had since pretty much I started driving it. The factory electric fans, I pulled the original relay out and just kind of like use like a jumper wire in where the relay was to keep them on all the time. So when I would pull into the pits and park the car, I would just pop the hood and pull that little jumper wire out so the fans would turn off. But that means that I can't shut the car off like sitting on grid if I'm out there for a while, because the fans are gonna run the whole time, and that could drain the battery. And we've had battery problems in the past. We're not going to anymore with the brand new Optima. Shout out to Optima. But either way, I don't want my fans running all the time. So we've got to put the fans on a switch, which means wiring in a relay and a fuse and actually doing it the proper way and not just using a silly jumper wire. So we're going to dive into that, get these fans wired correctly, and then finally they'll be on a switch where I can actually turn them on and off as needed. Let me show you how I wired this in case you want to do something similar on your Z or G. They're pretty much all the same. The wiring may be a little bit different as far as like colors are concerned. I noticed different years had different colors, but just look up a wiring diagram for the year car you have, and it should tell you which wire supplies what. Now, the only wires we really need to tap into are the high-speed fan wire and the ground. That's it. As long as we have power going in and ground coming out, we should be good. There's also a low speed and some other wires. We don't need any of that. Technically, yes, you could wire it to 2 switches or like a 3-way switch and have low and high speed, but I just wanted it off or on full blast. So that's what we did. So ignore the mess of wires, but the factory fan wiring comes in right around here. It branches off to 2 plugs that go into the fan shroud. One goes to one fan, one goes to the other fan. So figure out the high-speed power wire for each fan, tee them together, and then we're going to run that up into the engine bay into a relay. I also teed the grounds together and just put one ground right on the frame rail. From there, we ran the wire up into a relay. This was mounted up here. I guess it fell off. And relay wiring is pretty simple. And from the relay, we went inside the car to a switch, which looks like it belongs there. So now we've got our nitrous arming switch, the purge button, and our fan switch. I should probably label those. All right, now you're all caught up to speed. Let's take a good look at this damage and come up with a game plan on how we're going to fix it. So you may not be able to tell, but this quarter panel actually has a buckle in it right here. A nice dent there. Also got some new tire marks. Those were actually really cool. That's not. So we keep coming back. Obviously this happened at hot pit, that happened at hot pit, so that's not a big deal. Down here is new, and this is really the extent of the damage. This side is a bit worse. You can see the quarter panel is pushed in there. It's pushed out there. This was a cool little rub mark from Carson. And then this quarter panel is buckled as well, kind of in the same spot. So that shows you how much energy was put through these things. And we got lucky. The taillights didn't get messed up. The hatch is still perfect. All the damage is just right underneath it. So let's open the hatch up and take a better look. With the hatch up, it's pretty obvious what's going on here. You can see just how far in that's pushed. My little tow hook, pretty ruined. And the frame horn, or like the last little portion of the frame rail there, is pretty cooked. So this is what's important. This like straight line, basically here, runs all the way across. Everything after that is okay getting cut, but some pretty good damage in there. All right, so I'm gonna get the taillights off, get this thing up in the air and get the wheels off, and then we can take a better look underneath and make sure there's no real damage kind of past anything that's important. Because at a quick glance, it looks like everything that's damaged is all the stuff I was planning on cutting anyways. This car was destined to get a tube rear, which meant cutting everything off. I wasn't planning on doing it this week, but let's get in there and make sure that's all we have to do is just cut some stuff off and build some tubes off of that. Hopefully there's no damage deeper than that. Now the car did drive fine. If you saw the Fuel Fest video, pulled it out with a ratchet strap where it was rubbing the tire and kept driving all night. So I don't think we have any issues with like suspension or alignment, but we got to get in there and at least double check. All right, little tip here. I had to get all the wiring out of the way before we cut anything, pull anything, or really do anything. Since it's all just kind of a mess now that it's taken out of the car, I labeled what was important. Now really the only wires on this part of the car that I need are the taillights, but I still labeled them because just in case we get it kind of deep into this and I forget what's what or which light goes to which, wouldn't be the end of the world, but labeling stuff makes your life a whole lot easier. Little piece of tape, left tail, that's all I need to know. So those two go to my tail light, and pretty much everything else on this harness isn't important, and that's the other tail light. Little piece of tape there. All right, wheels are off, car's up on jack stands. Let's get under there and see what's really going on. Driver side wheel well, really no damage. I mean, like, it's a little crinkled in there, but that's so far back it's not important. What's important is everything like here forward. Actually, yeah, because that's where the subframe bolts. So this is what's important, and that's not messed with. It just kind of starts back here, which we don't care about. And same story. It's a little bit worse on this side, this back portion. This is actually what was hitting the tire at Fuel Fest, what I pulled out with a strap. But again, if we look at where the subframe bolts to, what's important is that bar. It's like kind of the actual frame. You can see this is the bar I'm talking about. It runs all the way across, and that's where the subframe bolts to. That's what's important that didn't move, and you can see it didn't even get touched. I mean, I can still fit my hand in here. So that didn't get touched, it's just all the trunk floor that did. This is what we're gonna end up building our tube rear off of, is this big metal beam that basically runs from the subframe pickup points on either side of the car. It creates like a box where the subframe bolts to. So that's really important that it didn't move, and I think we're good there. All right, well, underneath the car looks good. All that's left now is to start cutting some of this stuff out of the way so we can actually get back to that bar where that subframe bolts to that I pointed out underneath the car. And then we're gonna start building the tube rear off that. But we got a lot of cutting to do first, so let's grab the Sawzall and have some fun. First rough cut done. This was just to get some stuff out of the way so I can actually see what's going on and start making some more precise cuts. Don't worry, I am gonna be keeping track of all this because I do wanna weigh all the weight we're taking out of this, and I am gonna weigh the stuff we're putting back into it because I've got some tubing and some other stuff we have to fabricate. But that's down the road. We still have a lot more cutting to do. Just trying to get some of the sheet metal out of the way. We'll ratchet strap to the truck. There is officially no going back. All right, I've been cutting and cutting and cutting, and we're still not done cutting, but I figured I'd at least update you guys, show you where we're at, and kind of give you an idea of what my game plan is here. So let's ignore that side, it's not done yet. This side though, you can see I cut the frame rail back almost even with the big frame rail here that my little LED strip's mounted on. I think I'm gonna cut it back a little bit further so it is flush, and then I'm gonna box that in with a big plate of steel. And then off of this is where I will have the main hoop of my tube rear kind of going around. You can see I started cutting some of this off, Now I'm gonna save the rest of that for when I actually cut the quarter panels off. Now that won't be in this video just because I don't have the rear overs yet, but when we do get those, we're gonna do way more cutting, and I'll probably just do a full video on how I'm actually gonna wide body this car, because I'm gonna go about it a little bit different than you would, like, let's say if it was a street car, because there's two real big different ways you can do it, whether it's a street car or like a track only race car. But like I said, that's for another video. So I've got more cutting to do to get this trunk all cleaned up. I'm really trying to get a good base to build that tube rear off of, which means getting everything I can out of the way. Okay, we've been cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting, and I think we're finally done with cutting, at least for now, because there's more to do later. But I think we're at a good spot to start rebuilding the back of this thing, start putting some tubes back here, start making some cool stuff. So we've got our frame rails cut nice and flush here, so we're going to plate this in, but you'll notice there's a lip here from this factory frame rail where it meets up to the, I guess that's the frame rail. This is like a, we'll call this a crossbar because it joins the frame rails together. So there's a gap or lip between the frame rail and this crossbar. And this side, well, this side's a mess. The plan is to fill that little gap with rectangular tubing. It'll be like, I think it's 1 inch thick by 2 inches tall, and it'll run the span from frame rail to frame rail and kind of act as even more strength in between the frame rails, so that if we ever do get into a bad wreck, that should help it be even stronger. Because again, this is the part that we don't want to move, and it'll give us a real good base to build off of because it's going to be nice and flat instead of the factory metal, which is pretty flat, but still there's some variances there. Now this side was the problem child. You can see I cut some of the wheel well out, and I cut the top little cap of this frame rail off. It used to come to here, and then obviously it was cut open like that side over there. But it had dented in right here, and it would have made it really hard to build off of. So I just chopped a little section off. I will plate this in with sheet metal, but I want to wait until we have the rectangular tubing so I can kind of just base everything off that and build it all together, and it should work. Like I said, once we have that nice flat piece of rectangular tubing across the whole car, it'll make it real easy to build off of with actual tubing, so we can have some support back there and a bumper bar, if you want to call it that, or crash bar. But unfortunately it's like 8 p.m. right now, so we gotta wait till tomorrow so we can go pick up some materials and finally start building this thing. It's the next day, back from the metal supply store. I got that big beam, let's get to work. So I already cut it up. It's already halfway welded on the car. I just got to finish welding it. Now my welds definitely aren't the best, but I'm learning and I'm getting better. But we still have a long ways to go in that department. But let me at least show you where we're at so far. So this is 1x2 120 wall steel tubing, and you can see it's just welded in there. And like I said, it is now flush with this frame rail. So when we cap this off, we'll have a nice flat piece all the way across, and it'll give us something real cool to build off of. Should make it nice and modular for anything we want to do in the future. Some of the welds don't look bad. Some of them do look bad. Some of them are just like okay. Now if you're a welder, go ahead and roast me in the comments. But I will say I have improved quite a bit. Like, that's definitely not the best welding out there, but I'm getting better each time. And that's why I take projects on like this, is so I can learn, get better. One day I'll be able to fabricate some pretty cool stuff. And those may not be the prettiest welds, but I can say though they should be plenty strong. I don't think we'll have any issues there. So I'm gonna finish welding this up, and then we can start designing the actual tube that is gonna kind of create the bumper or crash structure here, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so I ended up just putting the camera down and getting to work because, like I said, I have an event to drive. By the time this video is out, the event has passed. But as of right now, it's Friday and the event's tomorrow. And we need some kind of protection on the back of this car, so if I do get into the wall, we're not just gonna run straight into the frame rails. But before I show you guys the finished product, let me show you the tools I have to work with and give you a little bit of backstory on how we ended up with what we've got. So this is my Rogue Fabrication tubing bender. Super cool piece. It's pneumatic. You just hook it up to air, hold the thing down, and then it does all the bending for you. It's a really cool piece when you know how to use it. I don't know how to use it, at least not yet. And like I said, with the event being tomorrow, I really didn't have time to sit down, figure it out, and go through all the stuff you have to go through in order to use one of these things properly. Really, I needed to bend up what they call a cheater bar, and then you use that to take your measurements, and there's a bit of a process to it, and with the time constraints I'm on, I just don't have time to dive into it. Now, I thought I could wing it, since all I really needed was a 90, a straight, and another 90, and I was just going to weld that onto the back of the car and call it good enough. Turns out that's pretty hard to make when you don't know how to measure it, you don't know how to set the machine up. I ended up kinking the first 2 bends that I did, scrapped that, tried to make just a simple U shape. It ended up being a mess, but it's better than nothing, and it's gonna keep me safe tomorrow at Drift Roulette. And then I'm cutting it off the very next day because it looks terrible. But like I said, it wouldn't be fair if I didn't show you guys the end result, and then you'll understand exactly why I'm saying I'm cutting this thing off. So here's what we're looking at for tomorrow's event. Like I said, definitely not the best. You can see I have not figured out that bender, but it's gonna work. It's gonna protect the car from getting totally smashed. I definitely should have made it like come out a little bit further, because you can see, I mean, we've got a lot of room to play with before I get to that bar, but whatever. It's temporary. I'm on a time crunch. It's gonna work for now. So expect a follow-up video on how to actually make a tube rear end, because this is definitely not it. But I think we've got a good base. So that big square beam I put in, that's gonna stay. That thing looks great. I'm really happy with how that turned out. I just have to figure out how to actually use the bender and make a nice functional tube rear end. I'll catch you guys in the next one, and hopefully between then and now, I'll actually learn how to use that bender and we'll get a proper tube rear end on this thing. For now, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.